The silent sentence. Have you ever noticed how certain men walk into a room and instantly command attention, while others are ignored as if they were invisible? It's not coincidence. It's not luck. It's not mysterious charisma. It asks something much more brutal and much simpler. The first visual impression decides your value before you utter a single word. Machiavelli observed this phenomenon in the corridors of Renaissance power. He saw brilliant men discarded because their clothes betrayed poverty. He saw fools elevated because their appearance suggested greatness. And he understood a truth most refused to accept. The world doesn't judge you for what you are. It judges you for what you appear to be. This isn't a lesson about vanity. It's a lesson about survival. Because when you allow the world to see you as poor, weak, diminished, you activate a primitive mechanism in the human brain. That mechanism instantly classifies you as prey, as someone who can be exploited, as someone who doesn't deserve respect. And once that classification is made, reversing it is almost impossible. The impression sticks to you like a brand from a hot iron. Even if you later accumulate wealth, even if you later demonstrate competence, there will always be that shadow. He used to be nothing. And that shadow corrodes every achievement you'll attain. What I'm going to show you today is an abstract theory. It's the social engineering that governs every human interaction. It's why empires were built on illusions. It's why leaders invest fortunes in ceremonies. It's why the first question we ask about someone is, how do they dress? The cruel physics of perception. There's a physics to human relationships that few understand. When you enter an environment, people's eyes don't just see you. They measure you, weigh you, classify you. And they do this in fractions of a second, long before the rational part of the brain has a chance to intervene. This classification is based on primitive visual signals: posture, clothing, physical presence, tone of voice. All these elements are instantly processed by the limbic system, the ancient part of the brain responsible for detecting threats and opportunities. And this system isn't interested in nuances or second chances. It decides predator or prey, strong or weak, valuable or disposable. When you show up with signs of poverty-worn clothes, hunched posture, evasive gaze, this system fires alarms, but not danger alarms. Exploitation, opportunity alarms. You're marked as someone without resources, without protection, without power to retaliate. And that mark attracts exactly the kind of treatment you want to avoid. Merchants offer you the worst prices. Employers assume you'll accept lower salaries. Potential allies avoid you because association with you offers no advantage. Even strangers on the street treat you with less courtesy because they subconsciously recognize you represent neither a threat nor opportunity. Compare this to the man who has mastered the art of appearances. His clothes are impeccable, even if there is only good clothes. His posture is upright. His gaze is steady. His voice doesn't tremble. Even if he has less money in his pocket than you, the world treats him radically differently. Doors open. People bow slyly when greeting him. His words carry weight. His opinions are solicited because he didn't activate the exploitation system. He activated the respect system. People don't know if he's dangerous or not, so they opt for caution. And caution manifests as respect. Machiavelli understood that power isn't just real capacity for action. It's perception of capacity. A prince with a weak army but who projects strength can avoid wars that a prince with a strong army but who projects weakness will have to fight. The illusion of power is, in many cases, more useful than real power, because real power needs to be demonstrated, which is costly. Illusion of power only needs to be maintained, which is cheap. You can have all the qualifications in the world. You can be the smartest in the room. You can have brilliant strategies and long-term vision, but if you look poor, weak, diminished, none of that matters, because people will never get close enough to discover your qualities. They've already decided, based on visual signals processed in milliseconds, that you're not worth the attention. The permanent theater of existence, life, isn't a meritocracy where the best win. It's a theater where the most convincing actors get the best roles, and you're on stage always, whether you want to be or not. Every time you leave home, you're performing. Every interaction is a scene, and the audience is constantly judging. The fatal mistake most make is thinking they can simply be authentic, and the world will recognize their intrinsic value. That's dangerous. Naivety. The world doesn't have the time or interest to discover who you really are inside. The world sees your external performance and assumes that's the whole truth about you. Think about the power rituals that survive to this day. Judges wear robes. Generals wear uniforms full of medals. CEOs appear in $1,000 suits. Why? Because everyone understands, consciously or unconsciously, that these symbols are part of power. Remove the judge's robe and put him in common clothes, and his authority diminishes. Nothing changed in the law, but everything changed in perception. The same logic applies to you. If you present yourself to the world without the appropriate symbols of competence and resources, you're asking to be ignored. You can protest that this is superficial, that people should judge you by the content of your character and not by appearance. But while you protest, others who understood the game are advancing. There are stories of entrepreneurs who, in the early days of their companies, rented luxury cars for important meetings, took out loans to buy expensive suits, frequented places beyond their means, just to be seen. And it worked, because investors, partners, and clients judged the company by the founder's appearance. They saw someone who looked successful and assumed they were successful. And based on that assumption, they gave opportunities that enabled real success. This is the alchemy of appearances. Illusion transforms into reality when sustained consistently. The man who fakes prosperity eventually attracts real prosperity. The man who displays poverty sinks deeper into poverty. Not because he lacks skills, but because doors are closed before he can demonstrate them. Machiavelli advised princes to spend fortunes on festivals, military parades, and grandiose architecture. Not out of extravagance, but out of strategy. Each military parade convinces enemies that attack would be costly. Each magnificent festival convinces the people that the prince is blessed by the heavens. Each imposing palace silences criticism before it's vocalized. The spending on appearances returns multiplied and submission avoided. You don't need to govern a principality to apply this logic. In every negotiation, meeting, social gathering, you're trying to influence perceptions, and perceptions are shaped by appearances before anything else. Arrive looking defeated and you'll be treated as defeated. Arrive looking victorious and you'll be treated as victorious, even if victory is still to come. The curse of visual memory here as a brutal truth about human psychology. People remember images much more vividly than words. You can forget what someone said. You rarely forget how someone looked when you first met them. This visual memory functions as a cognitive anchor. Once the brain categorizes you based on initial appearance, all future interactions are filtered through that category. If the first impression was poor, weak, without resources, then every subsequent action of yours will be interpreted through that lens. You made a successful deal, must have been luck. You presented a brilliant idea, probably copied it from someone. You demonstrated leadership, compensating for their inferiority. The human mind works tirelessly to maintain consistency with initial judgments. Contradicting the first impression creates cognitive discomfort, so the brain distorts new information to fit the established narrative. This creates a perceptual prison. Once you're seen as poor, every evidence that you're not will be dismissed as anomaly. He shouldn't be here. She must have deceived someone to reach this level. People prefer to believe you're a temporary imposter than recalibrate their initial assessment of you. On the other hand, if you establish from the beginning an image of competence and resources, every failure is seen as temporary exception, going through a difficult period. Had bad luck this time? We'll recover. People like that always recover. Same failure, radically different interpretation, simply because the initial perceptual anchor was different. Machiavelli observed this in how princes born poor but who hid their origin were treated. First princes, who let their initial poverty be known. The former were considered astute, self-made, worthy of admiration. The latter were considered lucky, unworthy of their position, always on the verge of returning to the streets. Same trajectory, completely different perception, all because they controlled or didn't control what people knew about their origins. You can try to fight against this. You can try to convince people that their initial impressions were wrong. But it's like pushing a rock uphill. It consumes enormous energy and progress is minimal. The alternative is to never create the wrong impression from the start. Never allow them to see you in a state of weakness or need. Always maintain the mask of strength, even when you're crumbling inside. This isn't dishonesty. It's survival. Because in a world that judges by appearances, controlling appearances is controlling destiny. And those who refuse to accept this, who insist on being authentic and showing their vulnerabilities, discover that authenticity is punished while performance is rewarded. The invisible weapons of presentation. Every element of your personal presentation is a weapon. Clothes, posture, tone of voice, speed of speech, quality of accessories, hygiene. Everything communicates status, resources, capability, and each of these elements can be sharpened or left to rust. Start with clothes. They don't need to be expensive. They need to be impeccable. A simple suit, but well-fitted and perfectly clean, communicates more than an expensive suit that's wrinkled. The message isn't "I have money." The message is "I have standards. I care about how I'm perceived. I have discipline to maintain appearances. And these qualities are valued in any context." Posture is equally critical. Slouching denotes defeat. Dropped shoulders suggest unbearable weight. Lowered gaze implies fear or shame. Adjust this and you adjust how the world treats you. Straight back doesn't cost money. Steady gaze doesn't require special training. But the impact is immense. People unconsciously step back when facing confident posture. Not because you're threatening, but because confidence suggests capability, and capability demands caution. Tone of voice works on frequencies that the conscious doesn't register, but the subconscious absorbs. Hesitant voice, full of ums and uncertain pauses, transmits doubt. Doubt in yourself translates into reasons for others to doubt you. Firm voice, controlled rhythm, adequate volume. All this communicates certainty, and people follow certainty, even when certainty is wrong, because certainty suggests knowledge and experience. Minor details matter more than you imagine. Clean nails, polished shoes, groomed hair. Each of these details is subconsciously noticed and weighed. Someone who doesn't take care of these details is someone who probably doesn't take care of bigger details. It's an unfair inference, but it's universal. Machiavelli advised rulers never to appear in public without adequate pomp, even in times of war or crisis, because worn public appearance communicates imminent defeat. And once the people sense defeat, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. Soldiers desert. Allies switch sides. Enemies are emboldened. All is triggered not by real weakness, but by apparent weakness. You have the same dynamics operating on a smaller scale. If you allow yourself to be seen in a state of desperation, disorder, or decay, people assume you're in a downward spiral. And once they make that assumption, they act in ways that accelerate the spiral. They offer you less. They charge you more. They avoid you so as not to be contaminated by your fall. But if you maintain appearances, even when you're struggling, people assume you have hidden resources, plans in motion, capacity to recover. And based on that assumption, they offer opportunities, make concessions, invest in you. Not because anything changed in your real situation, but because everything changed in the perception of your situation. This creates a vicious or virtuous cycle. Appearance of weakness leads to treatment that creates real weakness. Appearance of strength leads to treatment that creates real strength. The starting point isn't your real condition. It's your perceived condition. And perceived condition is under your control. As long as you understand you're in constant performance. The deadly price of humility. You've been taught since childhood that humility is virtue, that modesty is admirable, that revealing need inspires help. All of this is propaganda designed to keep the weak docile. Because true humility, the kind that comes from below, is read not as virtue but as weakness. And weakness invites not admiration, but exploitation. When a king humbles himself, it's theater. Everyone knows he can return to grandeur when he wants. When a beggar humbles himself, it's inevitability. There's no choice, only circumstance. Same act, opposite interpretations, all based on context of power. If you show your difficulties expecting compassion, what you generally receive is contempt, disguised as pity. Pity is what we feel for broken things that aren't worth the effort to fix. It's the emotion that precedes disposal. People may give alms, but they do it to rid themselves of your presence, not to elevate you. Machiavelli was explicit. Leaders who depend on the people's love are unstable. Love is volatile. Fear is reliable. But neither love nor fear spring from humility. They spring from demonstration of power, and demonstration of power requires maintaining appearances of invincibility, even when vulnerable. Think about historical moments where leaders lost power. It was rarely because of real weakness. It was because of perceived weakness. A king is seen fleeing the palace, and suddenly his authority evaporates. Not because he became weaker, but because he was seen in a state of weakness. The sight broke the illusion. And without the illusion, there's no power. You can argue you live in a modern world, not in a Renaissance principality, that these dynamics don't apply. But look around. Business leaders who publicly admit difficulties see stocks plummet. Athletes who show weakness lose sponsorship contracts. Artists who reveal desperation lose fans. The mechanism is identical, only the context has changed. The lesson isn't never ask for help. It's never ask for help from a position of visible weakness. You can seek alliance, partnership, collaboration. All of this from a position of apparent strength. I have an interesting project, and your expertise would be valuable is completely different from, I am desperate and need help. The first invites co-conspiracy between equals. The second invites exploitation of a subordinate. Performative humility can work, but only when it comes from an established position of strength. Despite all my successes, I still have much to learn works. I'm a failure trying to improve. Doesn't work. The difference lies in the perceptual anchor you've already established. The invisibility of the poor. There's a documented psychological phenomenon. People literally don't see beggars. It's not a figure of speech. Our tracking studies show that I skip over people who look poor as if they were part of the scenery. The brain categorizes them as not relevant and removes them from conscious processing. This happens because the human brain is constantly sorting information. It processes billions of bits of sensory data and has to decide what deserves conscious attention. One of the strongest filters is, can this help or harm me? If the answer is no to both, the information is discarded. When you look poor, weak, without resources, you become disposable information. You don't represent opportunity. You don't represent threat. Therefore, you don't deserve processing. People pass by you as if you don't exist. And in practical terms of social interaction, you really don't exist. Compare with appearance of wealth or power. This activates all relevance alarms. Potential opportunity. Potential threat. Need to categorize and respond appropriately. Suddenly you're on the conscious radar. Your words are heard. Your gestures are noticed. You exist in the social world in a way you simply didn't before. Machiavelli observed how messengers were treated differently based on how they were dressed. Same messenger, same message, but delivered in different clothes. Received different responses. Not because the content changed, but because packaging affected perception of the messages. Importance. You can have revolutionary ideas. You can have solutions to problems that plague your company or community. But if you seem irrelevant, your ideas die unheard. Because people don't even pay enough attention to process what you're saying. You are filtered out before opening your mouth. This invisibility is perhaps the cruelest form of rejection. It's not active hostility. It's complete indifference. You could be screaming and people would mentally adjust the volume down because you didn't pass the initial relevance test that appearance determines. And here's the most sinister aspect. Once invisible, you remain invisible. Because to become visible, you need opportunities, and opportunities come from being noticed. But you're not noticed because you look poor. It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Appearance of poverty, invisibility, lack of opportunity, real poverty, worsened appearance of poverty. The only way to break the cycle is to inject change from outside. Force appearance of resources you don't have yet. Borrow, rent, fake, whatever's necessary to cross the threshold from invisibility to visibility. Once visible, opportunities begin to appear. And opportunities generate real resources that eventually sustain the appearance that was once illusion. The unwritten code of power in all societies. There are unwritten codes about how power presents itself. These codes vary culturally, but exist universally, and violating them has immediate and severe consequences, even though no one can explain exactly why you were punished. In some cultures, power dresses in black. In others, in white. In some, silence denotes strength. In others, eloquence. But in all, there's a code. And part of mastering any environment is learning the local code of power performance. Machiavelli advised princes to study local customs, not out of cultural respect, but out of strategic necessity. A prince who violates local codes of appropriate behavior is seen as foreign, incompetent, illegitimate, even if he has army and money. If he fails to perform power according to local expectations, he faces constant resistance. You face the same challenge on a smaller scale. Every professional environment has codes about appropriate presentation. Every social class has membership markers. Every industry has unofficial uniforms. If you ignore these codes, you're immediately marked as an outsider. Being an outsider isn't necessarily bad if you have enough independent power to ignore norms. But if you're trying to climb, being marked as an outsider closes doors, because insiders protect their territory, and one of the easiest ways to do that is through appearance codes that outsiders do you and know or cue you and replicate. This creates invisible but very real entry barriers. You can have all the qualifications on paper, but if you don't dress right, don't speak right, don't move right, you don't pass the initial filter. And the cruelty of this is that no one will tell you why you were rejected. Simply not a good fit. The solution isn't to denounce the system's injustice. The system doesn't care about your objections. The solution is to learn the codes, master the signals, perform the role until performance becomes second nature. Then you can, if you want, break rules deliberately, because you've already established legitimacy. But trying to break rules before mastering them is social suicide. You'll be seen not as a bold rebel, but as a person who doesn't know basic rules. And people who don't know basic rules are dismissed as incompetent, not celebrated as innovative. The final armor in the end. Your appearance is the last and most important armor you possess. Not just against others' judgment, but against the very self-destructive tendencies that emerge when you allow yourself to be seen as weak. Because here's the psychological truth. How others treat you affects how you see yourself. If the world treats you as a loser, you start believing you're a loser. If the world treats you as a conqueror, you start acting like a conqueror. External performance shapes internal reality as much as the inverse. Machiavelli understood that maintaining appearances wasn't just about deceiving others. It was about not deceiving yourself. The prince who allows himself to look defeated begins to feel defeated. And feeling defeated leads to decisions of a defeated person, which lead to real defeat. But the prince who forces himself to maintain appearances of victory, even when losing, forces himself to think like a victor. And thinking like a victor generates strategies that can turn the tide. Appearance maintains mentality. Mentality maintains the fight. The fight creates chance of victory. You need to understand that controlling how you're perceived isn't about superficial vanity. It's about building the reality you want to inhabit. Because social reality is built by shared perceptions. If you control perceptions, you control your reality. The man who never allows himself to look poor, Ebenweni's, keeps doors open that the man who admits poverty sees close, maintains dignity that the man who humbles himself loses, maintains options that the man who resigns himself no longer has. And in crisis situations, when you most need allies, opportunities, chances, these only come if you don't look desperate. Desperation repels. Composure attracts, even if composure is a thinly maintained facade over internal turbulence. So the question isn't whether you'll wear a mask. You already are. The question is whether you'll do it consciously or unconsciously, whether you'll choose which mask to show or let circumstances choose for you. Machiavelli chose consciously, and although he died poor in terms of resources, he never allowed himself to be seen as poor while alive. He maintained correspondence with the powerful. He wrote as if he were still in the corridors of power. He spoke as advisor to princes, even when exiled. The mask was maintained until the end, and ironically, that mask became reality after his death. His words have influenced power for centuries. His philosophy shaped nations. His reputation surpassed that of the princes he served, because he understood the fundamental truth. Appearance isn't the opposite of substance. Well-constructed appearance becomes substance. You're in the same game. You can play it consciously and have a chance to win, or you can pretend the game doesn't exist and guarantee your defeat. Because the world won't change its rules to accommodate your comfort. The world will continue, judging by appearances. The only question is whether you'll master that judgment or be crushed by it. So never, under any circumstance, allow yourself to be seen as poor. Even if you're broke, even if you're desperate, even if you're one step from collapse, maintain the mask. Maintain the posture. Maintain the illusion of strength. Because that illusion is the bridge between where you are and where you need to be. Without that bridge, you fall into the abyss of invisibility, and with it, you can cross to solid ground. And once there, the illusion will no longer be necessary, because you'll have built the reality that sustains it. This is the fatal power of appearances. Fatal for those who ignore it, liberating for those who master it. The choice has always been and always will be yours, if you've made it this far. A part of you already knew this truth. The world judges books by their covers. Always has, always will. Now, tell me in the comments. Are you ready to control your cover? Ready to invest in appearances as you invest in skills? Ready to never again allow the world to see you as poor, weak, or diminished? If this message made sense, if something in you recognizes the brutal truth of these words, write in the comments, "I will never look poor." Let's see how many here are truly ready to master the theater of existence. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's more important than you imagine. See you there.